The pandemic took the world by surprise, and I really don't think that anyone was prepared for the impact and the future challenges that we're about to embrace upon. Our lives went from socializing to complete isolation. Currently, the CDC and the World Health Organization have stated that more than 2 million people have died from the complications of the virus, and that number is constantly rising. The novel coronavirus is considered one of the most deadliest respiratory global epidemics in centuries, and different variants of the virus are morphing daily. It is safe to say that our entire world has been impacted by this virus, and many people question what our new normal will look like. That question is still unanswered today. Several countries shut down and locked their borders as the virus ravaged their countries. And at this time, no one really had the answers to this crisis, and everyone was scrambling to find solutions and resources to stop the spread and reduce anxiety and fears amongst the people. The national lockdown drastically impacted our economy and our ability as a world to physically and socially connect and communicate. Several states mandated the 14 to 30-day stay-at-home lockdown curfews. This curfew meant that most businesses and schools had to shut down. The shutdown also significantly impacted our nation's medical, behavioral health, and economical concerns and issues. These restrictions mandated on the states and the world caused significant hardships for many. Many people lost their jobs and lacked the resources to pay their bills and feed their families. This was a very tough and pivotal time for everyone. When our schools across the country shut down in mid-March of 2019, e-learning went from an optional tool to a mandatory tool. Surprisingly, distant learning has had its mixed reviews. For many parents juggling working at home while also helping their kids navigate the e-learning world, this has been an experience of frustration. And while some students excelled, others suffered without the tools and resources readily available in school. One of the first issues that has to be considered if anyone was going to homeschool and virtual learning, this represented a major lifestyle change. Those parents will need to ensure that their child was logged into virtual classroom, completing the homework, and constantly staying in contact with the school for any updates. These responsibilities were added to your normal role as a parent. The challenges of homeschooling are even more difficult if you are a single parent. During the pandemic, districts scrambled to distribute laptops and internet so students can engage in schooling from home. But almost a year later, with no end in sight for virtual learning, millions of students still lack reliable, fast internet or working computers to be able to accomplish their assignments. Online learning during the pandemic has exposed the extent of internet access and disparity among students. This is often referred to as the digital divide. The digital divide is a complicated matter and is hard to solve. The cost of broadband is out of reach for many families. High-speed internet lines are scarce in rural areas and even some urban areas, and there's little to good and consistent data on the extent of internet connectivity. This is something that the federal government could have taken the lead on years ago, but didn't. I'm glad to say that at least the current administration is taking a look at it. As for computers, many low-income students got them only halfway through the year, further slowing their learning process. And most districts supplied devices that were not well kept or current. You may find that struggling students are often struggling because of the circumstances outside of their control. They may not have a quiet space to do their schoolwork. They may be balancing work and childcare, helping out at home. The pandemic highlights another wrinkle in the digital divide, amplified by the ongoing pandemic. While school districts raced and outfitted every student with internet and Chromebooks, laptops, and other devices, a new challenge emerged: internet connections that cannot support online learning. As spoken earlier, the digital divide is still very much present in the U.S., and only 71% of Americans actually subscribe to broadband at home, an adoption rate lower than any other nation with a similar GDP. The adoption rate was even lower amongst African Americans and Hispanics. Some great ideas to get input to help the digital divide and get feedback to improve the status. It's important that we take surveys from our students so we can determine the percentage of population that doesn't have internet access. And also when planning, we should plan one-on-one projects and choosing devices, consider devices capacity for offline use. A couple other great ideas or best practices. We should set benchmarks and track progress, build in time for students and reflection, keep an open mind and avoid assumptions, develop relationship with parents, personalize learning, and introduce texts and topics that are culturally relevant. As we get ready to go back to school, we must note there's some things that our students are going to be considering. We must consider to anticipate some type of anxiety and nerves. And we also need to stay flexible, adaptive, and supportive for our students as they go back to school into an unknown environment. It's also important that we encourage our kids to think positive. We need to talk to our kids positively. We need to feel positive about what they're doing and give them the motivation and the support for them to go back to school to do well. Last but not least, take a second to applaud yourself. You finally made it. Be proud of these accomplishments and don't let this moment and day pass you by without at least thinking about the challenges you faced to accomplish your goals and dreams through a pandemic.